for the voluntary world that we are working towards, the only way to form relationships, whether it's romantic or friendship or business relationships, is to add value first, to attract voluntarily the other party to approach you and form partnerships. So,
welcome everybody. We're doing an Anarchapulco 24/7, 365 interview with Anam Paisenta and Kent Dahlgren.
Hey, good job. Silent H. Nailed it.
The whole idea here is to introduce our community to people that are not only great anarchists, but people that are actually doing things that are and suggesting solutions to the problems that actually work, that can get things done. And so we'll start with Anam. Anam, give us a little bit of your background, who you are, and maybe even start off with how you became an anarchist. I don't know.
So my name is Anam Paisenta, and I guess I'll list some of the things that I've worked on or done about anarchy. I wrote the children's book called Three Friends Free. I have done a whole bunch of these, the Anarchast and a whole bunch of these sort of things, and spoken at the first two Anarchapulcos. I'm concerned with the spiritual side of anarchy, the internal, like the inner growth that we're going to have to do in order to have a free society. I am a founding member of the Voluntaryist Brotherhood Motorcycle Club. And I also operate PREMA, which is Paiseanta's real estate mentoring for anarchists. And my goal there is to get anarchists more powerful and more effective in the world by helping them create time freedom and financial freedom. So those are some of the things that I'm working on or have done in the past.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, you did an exceptional podcast, which is, as far as I'm concerned, if there's a perfect anarchist podcast for introducing anarchy to people, I think that interview that you did with Benny Wills for the Joy Camp podcast is just perfect, and and I will link that one because it is a great interview.
Thank you for kind words.
Kent, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, so I'm Kent Dahlgren. I didn't know I was an anarchist until recently, which, I was joking with Michael. I remember in the 80s I had my skateboard and I would spray paint a big A on the side of the grocery store and not had the first idea what it meant, right? And then so in the years since, I actually got into, I was in private industry, worked for manufacturing companies, and I ended up getting into information security and anti-fraud. And then I learned by degrees that there isn't actually an institutional, there's no institutional incentive to actually fix the issues of security and fraud. Like what I kept experiencing was a company would go through a loss, a big loss that you hear about in the media. The companies that so the companies I work for provide security infrastructure for pretty much every modern operation in the modern world. So, finance, banking, insurance, healthcare, retail, social, energy, nuclear, blah, 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 healthcare. So all those, right? So, if you've done transactions in the modern world, they've been protected by infrastructure that I've either helped design or managed, right? And so what I kept experiencing was that there'd be a massive loss that you'd see in the media. And then what would happen was, well, in effect, people would get raised. Like there would be a couple of people that would get canned, right? But for the most part, the IT staff just got a major infusion of budget. More jobs were there, people got paid more, and then they would get another loss, and then we get and whatever. And I became curious about that. Like, well, what is that? I mean, it seems to me that, in fact, you could look this up. There's a strong positive statistical correlation between the amount of money that is invested in information security, right? Like this, and the number of breaches. And one begins to wonder, like, is the fox is guarding the hen house on this one? And so concurrent to this, I had done skateboard advocacy, and it wasn't, it was to create a place for people to skate, a safe and legal place to skate. And I started and I ran a nonprofit that taught political advocacy. And then I was on the board of the Tony Hawk Foundation for 2 years. that, you know, it's a company that gives out millions of dollars of grants to communities. And I became acquainted with the, you know, the 1,000 varieties of corruption that happens in small communities, where people that are on the council will, you know, do sort of marginally illegal activity to basically ensure that their friends get a piece of public land, or da-da-da-da. So anyway, between those two experiences, I end up, you know, realizing, like, you know, the biggest problem we have isn't, you know, bunkers of hackers in some foreign country. It's actually 1,000 varieties of people stealing from the till. It's basically our stewards are thieves, and and we're the collateral damage, right? So, you know, by degrees, I started working on something that would enable the community to actually just have breathing room so they can survive without having their, you know, trusted stewards continuing to steal from them, right? And so, you know, what that's resulted in is a platform, actually a company that I own called 214 Alpha. And it's a mobile-based platform that would enable a community to launch and sustain its own economic development without the use of, you know, taxes or bond levies or whatever. And the way we do it is just, you know, something like a loyalty buck, essentially. It's like not much different than how Amazon, or not Amazon, but like Starbucks does it, but it's exclusive to that community. And I won't go into too much detail. But anyway, the people that I end up talking to more and more, I'm like, oh, well, you sound like me, but you call yourself an anarchist, and that's weird, because I thought anarchists are people that wear black and throw chairs through windows, but, you know, you're not that person. Like, what you end up doing is really just putting together solutions in the wake of chaos, right? And so I had been conditioned to believe that there was a relationship between the word chaos and anarchy. That's actually not true at all. So anyway, that's my background on it, which is to say I'm just a newbie.
Great, thanks, Kent. So I guess I'll just start off with, you know, where this all started in regard to creating this interview. And Anam, you had posted a thing on Facebook, and I'll just read it if you don't mind, that said, I just saw a cop parked in front of my Cadillac. He was running the license plate cards to find out who owns it. When he found it to be owned by a New Mexico LLC with non-public members, he drove away with a perplexed and frustrated look on his face. I urge you to research privacy as a defense against government. And, you know, this is an example of something that I think is that a lot of people are missing, is that there's a lot of ways that you can strengthen, there's a lot of ways that an individual can strengthen their position in any situation, whether they're living in a totalitarian society or they're living in total freedom. There's ways to grow your freedom. And this is just one example. But it seems like a lot of people are conditioned to effectively be weak. And so I'll start off the first question with, like, what is the average person doing that's creating such a circumstance that, like, the predator class is allowed to prey on them because they are simply just weak?
You know what? I wrote a WordPress blog about this topic about 10 years ago now, where I was kind of examining how we haven't ever taken the time to really define what is identity. They don't teach it in schools. We just kind of get this inherited paradigm that identity is something that is put on you and maintained by someone else. It's maintained by the Department of Motor Vehicles. It's your social security number, your government ID, you know, all those sort of things, and that's who you are at all times. But I think that needs to be re-examined. It's not taught in schools, but in other areas of our lives, we have like role-based identity. You know, like your kids will call you dad, and your you know, you have these different identities based on roles, but when it comes to interacting with the public or with government, there's like you have to have an assumed identity. And I think that should be re-examined so that people can create more of intentional identities that are appropriate for the roles that they're engaged in at the time.
Yeah.
That's one thing. Like saying, like, here's an example of the concept, like saying I was a victim of identity theft. That's like reaffirming in your mind that identity is this file that's kept elsewhere that someone else is guarding on your behalf, not, and that it can be accessed by anyone. But that's not really it, is it? Like, identity is you walking down the street. If you're skateboarding, your identity is a skater. If
Right.
you are engaged in business, your identity is a businessman. If I'm walking down the street, then that's my identity right there. It can't be stolen. It's Anam Paisenta walking down the street.
Right.
They can like find out what a credit card number is and steal that. But is that really stealing my identity? Or is it stealing for a moment some credit off my credit card? I think that there's a whole bunch of inherited paradigms that in the end are disempowering to us that should be re-examined. Like,
yeah, I mean, what you said as a victim, I'm a victim of identity theft, is a great way. That's a great framing.
yeah.
People don't even question the fact that they've adopted the victim stance, which removes agency from them, right? Yeah.
And also, your FICO score is not your identity. That's made up by someone else. It's almost not even your business what your FICO score is. You know what I mean?
Right.
Absolutely.
No, those are good points.
Well, I mean, just to get a little further into this, though, you know, like the average person, you know, they register their car.
Yeah.
They buy their car and they register it and they put their plates in it, and then the police comes by and runs their plates. And not only do they know who the person is that's driving the car, but they can access all kinds of records, where your house is, you know, how much money you're making, where you work at, you know, just a multitude of information. And for the most part, most people are just providing that information. And they're just like with Facebook, they're just providing all this information, all the friends that where they're going, all this kind of stuff. They're providing all that information for the government or for anybody else that wants to con them or prey on them to use against them.
Mm-hmm.
And just because most people don't, doesn't mean that it won't happen to them. And so the fact that they're doing it, how do we change people's minds about doing, or like, you know, not being aware of that and just allowing that to go on? And then, like, in taking control of that, how much more freedom that gives them, you know? Where's the awareness for that?
Is that question to Kent or myself?
Seems like a good one for you, buddy.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, I would say that people should, you know, to act with intention, I think you have to start with, like, what's your goal? Just like when you get in the car, you don't just start driving until you see somewhere you want to be. You start with the goal in mind, and then you go that direction, right? So
Right.
I think that, like, because privacy measures are expensive and time consuming, you should identify first what your intention is, what your goals are. So if you want to be, like, here's an example from my own case. If you want to be a public figure speaking about politics and critical of the establishment, you might have one level of control over your identity that would be probably more involved than just the average guy who manages the grocery store.
Yeah, I'm actually literally experiencing that right now. Is that you know, we have a Facebook presence for our company, and you know what we advertise is that a community which is inclusive to a small town or a neighborhood within a town could use our platform to launch and sustain their own economic development without the use of government, right? And so what we're currently experiencing now is a orchestrated shutdown of the Facebook accounts and our presence on Facebook. It's actually, you know, challenging the identity, saying you have to enter your phone number, and when we do, they say that's not valid. What they're doing is shutting us off the platform, right? So this is the thing, as you said, most people don't experience that, right? And the only thing I've done that's dangerous is talk about the fact that communities don't need government. And it's like, I was on the phone with Michael not even 30, 40 minutes ago when it happened, and it's happening for the other people in my organization too. So there you go, case in point.
It's crazy how you'll get every resident in your neighborhood to bitch about government until you say, maybe we don't need government. Maybe our solutions are elsewhere. Maybe we can do this on a community level.
Right.
then everybody's like, oh no, that's crazy.
Oh, I know. Yeah. I mean, this is why I've gone out of my way to express it in terms that are familiar, to say, you know, you guys all go to Starbucks and you put, you know, $10 on your app, and then you buy a $2 cup of coffee and you leave $7.50 on your app, right? That's literally what we're talking about, but it's peer-to-peer trade. And because you're not funneling money through Visa and Amazon, you're saving tons of money, which stops economic leakage. So I'm describing in very simple terms how they could do it. And this is what makes it dangerous. This is why I've explicitly not talked about crypto, because when I talk crypto, it confuses people, right? Ironically. So, I mean, I'm literally using crypto technology. They just don't need to know that. You know, I mean, nobody understands it. So, so that's what makes it dangerous, is like, oh my God, this does empower people. I mean, I'd have to imagine that's what it is, because I haven't said anything. I explicitly say nothing about politics on our page or even on my profile. So I can only imagine it has to do with that, right? Like when you become dangerous, you get silenced. Ta-da!
Yeah, so I think that, so wherever there's a challenge, you know, coming from an entrepreneurial mindset, whenever there's a challenge, there is an opportunity.
Right.
And, you know, there needs to be a Facebook that's for specific roles, like, you know, talking about making identities for specific roles, but there needs to be a social media platform that will not ever succumb to government pressure, like the Float app. That my friends Aaron Nakamoto and Kingsley Edwards have created. I bet that would be probably a more welcoming platform for your goals.
Yeah, and then, you know, like Michael had also talked about time banking, which is a kick-ass concept, because, you know, in using the time banking metaphor, Michael could probably elaborate, but in that context, somebody could create and be mindful about the creation of an identity that they present to their community, right? So, like, let's say that in the context of time banking, regardless of what platform, let's say that I say I'm an entrepreneur that's making myself available to the others, and I, you know, will apply my creativity to help people, you know, develop some financial self-sufficiency. And then you could curate that identity, and it's one that's from a place of more action. I don't know if you agree, but it feels like that's about right. Michael, do you want to elaborate on the time banking metaphor? Because I love it, you know.
Well, I think, you know, for me, the time banking thing is about, you know, allowing people to maybe do something like a hobby or utilize a skill that they may not necessarily think is like ready for prime time or something like that, but they can volunteer a certain amount of hours of their time, or if they just feel like they're, you know, they want to help out others in their community. But if the others in the community recognize that, yeah, that your time is valuable, and then accumulating hours that can be exchanged with other people, you know, so some kind of a system that recognizes those transactions, and then you can use that as a alternative currency. And although I don't think it's a solution for every problem, I think it's just another tool. And you know, but like, for example, if I'm an artist or something like that, and I want to paint people's portraits, and I'll say I'll paint your portrait, you know, if it takes like an hour or something like that, I'll do that for anybody in the community, and I'll volunteer a couple hours a week to do that. And if someone takes me up on that, it starts to show that, man, I'm a great artist when it comes to portraits. I might find out that over a course of a few months that I can actually do a business doing this. And so it becomes much more, you know, and I think that's one of the things that it allows people to, you know, recognize more clearly that there's other things other than just monetary value that that people represent. And, you know, our society is so tied into money and everything being monetized that they forget that there's other values that we have within our community. And certainly it's one of those things that also strengthens the community, because as we start to realize that everybody has value and skills and abilities that we can utilize within the community, we start to utilize them things. Anam has got a great example, and that is you know, what he talks about with this PREMA. How long have you been doing that, Anam?
I started it in the end of 2017.
Okay, so it's been a few years, but one of your students is Benny Wills,
Hmm.
and he is really demonstrated the total package. He took your advice. He he basically did what you told him to do, and today he can say he is in a lot better position than he was a year ago because he saw what you could offer. He took it up, and now he's really building. He's a representation of your reputation
Mm.
for being able to bring information to people and skills and ability and processes and techniques that they can use to further themselves.
Yeah.
But you want to describe that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So PREMA, I teach anarchists. I used to teach the people in my local area. We had a real estate investor club, and I would always put on a presentation, and then I would also bring in a speaker. But I decided at some point that I wanted to put my efforts towards our people, towards anarchist people working for a society based on consent, a futuristic type society. So I thought I better put my energy towards the people who will contribute to this vision. So I basically put everything online, started putting these presentations on a Facebook page that people, once they sign an agreement with me, they get access to. They're able to learn these techniques that are really easy for beginners that don't require like any credit or cash or experience. And I have a few successful students. I think there's like 20 something students, but a few of them have actually taken steps and moved forward. And probably the best examples are Benny and Sonia. And we kind of jokingly call their program PREMA Plus, because they were just like, tell us what to do, and we want daily contact, and we'll give you a percentage of the deals.
Yeah.
And so I became like we had daily meetings for a while, and they were like, they had the right mix of great attitude to, willingness to learn, willingness to take steps forward despite having fear, and the ability, they're both very intelligent, so the ability to comprehend and move forward. And they did that, and they had challenges along the way, like every deal does, but they are successful real estate investors. Yeah. And they've been in many deals and completed one house rehab. And they're in the middle of a new deal right now. And they're, as far as like what they can do, in my mind, they're already millionaires. They already have the comprehension and the ability to take it to the sky, and then gain the ability to help so many more people,
That's awesome.
Yeah, and what I think this is really an example of is a reputation system, because it's not only just their efforts. Their efforts result in an investment for the rest of the community, because they've already demonstrated that like they can take a investment and turn it into a much more valuable investment,
Right.
and people profit from it. And so like one of the things that is really unique about Anam's thing is the idea of like creating the opportunity for investors, because if you don't have money, somebody's got to put the money in. But if it's a good investment, then people with money would probably want to put their money in there, and especially with the way that the banks are paying interest now, having a return on investment that's 10% would be tremendous.
Yeah.
And if it's helping another person in your community, or maybe quite a few people in your community, this is a real good possibility, and it's about the reputation of the people that, oh, okay, yeah, they can do that. They know what
Right.
can be done. They have shown a reliable nature to them, and they can be trusted.
Hmm.
Well, the system that we, oh, sorry, go ahead, Michael.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, the system that we designed has 7 pre-integrated functions. You know, it's digital identity / verification, which is in alignment with what you were talking about, Anand. And then, you know, communication, secure chat, commerce, banking, reputation, arbitration, and governance. So the reputation angle on that actually includes a dimension that I had added that I call weft. And what weft, it's, you know, the metaphor comes from the domain of, you know, weaving, obviously. But weft is, actually, to understand weft, it's helpful to talk about selvage, actually. Selvage is if somebody can innovate a way to effect a reduction in the rates of conflict and arbitration, we pay them for that because it helps us optimize our system. And it's actually a monetizable reputation. So it's not only it gives you a score, but it's actually a form of this loyalty token that you're able to generate because you've done this. You actually get paid for your reputation. So in this case, the intention is to help skillful mediators compete with lawyers, because in the context of our current legal system and financial system, lawyers monetize conflict. They just perpetuate endless cycles of conflict, right? But in the context of the system that we've defined, somebody would have a better alternative to say, well, I might just choose restorative justice to try to deal with this, and I might not want to use an attorney, right? So anyway, likewise, there is a dimension we call weft, and this is the one that might be of interest to you, is that if you can come up with ways to elevate the reputation of others, we also pay you because you're actually helping optimize the system. So the services that you provided to the people that you described, that would actually trigger a positive application of the weft token. So then you'd be able to say, this is my earned reputation because I've been able to help these people. Well, I mean, it wouldn't take much to add the dimension of what they call stigmergy, which is to say, if you taught others to teach others, you would actually have an incurred benefit. You'd say, it's not just that I help the reputation of others, but by virtue of my program, I'm helping them help others, and it actually elevates it as well. So, you know, the idea being is that you'd be able to, at a glance, say, I only really want to work with those who have a weft score of this or greater, right? So, you know, I'm not arguing that it's perfect, but it's an idea, right? The idea is that we might be able to create a system that that enables us to step away from the norms, the social norms that are imposed upon us by the existing systems.
Yeah, that's funny that you bring that up. The agreement for mentorship in PREMA actually does have a component of pay it forward, where
Nice.
within 2 years they're required to find 3 other anarchists to teach the similar.
That's kick-ass.
You know, what's in my program plus what they've learned along the way, so that not
That's
only is it
tremendous.
does it have a network effect, but that it will also have like an exponential like vault, an exponentially growing vault of information, because it'll be my information that seeded it, but also you know, their experiences over that first 2 years along with it, you know.
No, that's great. I mean, that really, like, you know, within my company, we have a real emphasis towards servant-hearted leadership. And so like that triggers me. I think that's fantastic because that's what we're doing. We have to help grow it. We have to bootstrap this thing because there's such a tremendous number of people who have been institutionalized to believe that they have no agency. So, you know, building that into your system is a great example. I love hearing about this sort of thing.
Another thing that you do, Anam, that I really appreciate is the way that you go about selling, you know, the win-win solution for everybody, and kind of delivering that to, you know, the whole picture. Because this is another thing, and this is something that Benny related to me, is, you know, how you know, everybody that's involved has to win. And, you know, this is certainly something about voluntarism that is something that's kind of unique to people that are coming from the statist society and really don't realize it. They always think that people have to be fooled, or, you know, they're conned into doing their particular role. But in your system, everybody wins. Can you go into?
Well, that's it. Like, you know, we see people that have this kind of zero-sum mentality of life, that if I win, someone else has to lose. And for the voluntary world that we are working towards, the only way to form relationships, whether it's romantic or friendship or business relationships, is to add value first, to attract voluntarily the other party to approach you and form partnerships or working relationships. And real estate is a way, I mean, because, you know, a house is such a big ticket item and it's such an important part of someone's life, you know, being shelter. There are a lot of parties involved in transactions. And, you know, the anarchist way to approach things is like, how can I help you, basically? You know, how does this benefit you? Because if I take advantage of someone, for example, I might be able to get a good deal on something right now, right? But ultimately it's more expensive because I won't be able to work with that person in the future. And if they're really good, it actually is a better deal for me to make sure, like, to guard their benefit in the deal, so that I have so that my network gets stronger and stronger, and my deals start to flow faster and smoother, you know. But it's not just that way with it's not just that way with business. It's that way with, like, romantic relationships. You know, an anarchist has to be seeking how to add value to the other person and to let the person go when that's the right thing, and manage attachment. And this is kind of where, one of the many places where voluntarism has a spiritual aspect to it, because the world that we want, where we're just letting people do whatever they want to do, is only possible when we're able to be mature enough inside and manage attachment